All right, so if you remember, what we were talking about was we were talking about volume of spheres, and we have a new formula for that volume. Okay, it's a different formula than for cylinders because it's a different shape, so we need a different formula. So our first sphere that we had was this guy right here. It was a sphere, and it gave you the radius was 4 inches. So radius is 4. We're going to plug that in for r, and we're going to simplify using order of operations. So we've got v equals 4/3 pi times 4 cubed. Okay, so remember PEMDAS, order of operations, we have to start with that exponent before we talk about multiplication and division. Let me just see. All right, so before we start talking about multiplication and division, we've got to do 4 to the third. Remember what that is? That's 4 times 4 times 4, 3 total times. So we've got 4/3 pi 64. 4 cubed became 64. That's a 4. Okay, now multiplication and division is all we have left. So we're going to do that as it appears from left to right. So the first thing is that division. And we get the same decimal every single time. Okay. So that division became that decimal. Now we've got to multiply. So we've got 1.33 times pi. And remember, pi is 3.14. And my last step is to multiply by that 64. So we're going to multiply by 64 to get our answer here. And I'm going to round to 2 decimal places. I didn't tell you what to round to, so any answer is valid. Now remember, we need units. A lot of us got this answer, but a lot of us didn't put units. Our original units were inches, so my final units will be cubic inches. Okay?
Hey, Ms. Whitehill, I have a question for you.
Yes, Mr. Pass.
Can you start the formula as just V is equal to 1.33 times 3.14 times 64?
Sure, that's fine too. Either one is fine. So let's do that for number 2. So if we get the approximations already, we got this right here, okay? Either one is fine. They're both the same formula. So we've got our sphere right here. This is number 2. We've got our radius of 12 feet here. So we've got different units here. So our final units are going to be a different number or a different value. Okay. So remember, radius, that's the length from the center to the edge of the sphere. So we've got 12 feet as our radius here. We're going to put it in for r. So we've got v equals that decimal approximation twice, and then 12 to the third. Okay, so again, order of operations, we have to do PEMDAS. So exponents come before multiplication. So we're gonna do 12 to the third. This is gonna be a really big number, but that's okay. 12 times 12 times 12. Think about how big this sphere is. 12 feet, that's a lot of space. So 12 cubed, we get this big number right here. We're gonna rewrite everything we haven't touched, just like this. And now we're going to multiply. And we're going to multiply left to right. So we're going to start with that 1.33 times pi. And last but not least, we're going to multiply these two numbers together. Hey, my friends, can we mute really quick, please? Okay, so when we multiply our last two numbers, we get this super big number, but it's a super big sphere, so it makes sense that we get this big number. Now, my initial units were feet, so my final units will be cubic feet. Same thing, we just add the word cubic in front because we're talking about 3 dimensions, and cubic means 3 dimensions. We're on number 2, for anybody who's lost. Number 2 with a 12-foot radius. Okay. Any questions on number 2? All right, we got one more and then I'm out of your hair. Okay, so number 3, and I'm going to use this simplified formula for you guys again. We've got this sphere right here, 3-dimensional, radius of 22 yards. Okay, this is another really big sphere, 22 yards. Think about how many feet that is. That's 66 feet, a lot of feet. So we've got our radius, 22 yards, and we get that because that's the distance from the middle to the edge. Okay, the middle to the edge is 22 yards. Oops, hold on one second. Somebody asked a question. Okay, now we're on number 3 for anybody who's confused. Number 3. Okay, so we're going to replace r with how long the radius is, just like usual. So we get v equals that decimal approximation, the approximation for pi, and then the radius to the 3rd power. So remember what to the 3rd power means. It means 22 3 times. So we got 22 times 22, and then another last final 22. So 3 total 22s multiplied together. Everything I haven't touched yet, I'm rewriting. Again, big number, but this is a huge sphere. This is even bigger than the last one. Okay, now we're going to multiply left to right. So we're going to do 1.33 times pi, which is 3.14. So these two guys multiply together to get the same decimal approximation that we usually have. Okay, now we multiply our last two numbers. So we're going to multiply that number by 10,648. Excuse me. Okay, and we get this big, huge number, big, huge sphere. Makes sense. Okay, our original units were yards, so our final units are cubic yards. Okay. Any questions on questions 1, 2, or 3?